Human rights should be basic rights that everyone is born with. If you want to have fun, just let yourself enjoy and laugh. Even if you're different, you can still enjoy your life as others do. Nobody can decide what you should be. There should be no differential treatment or discrimination. No matter who you are, nobody can take your culture and traditions away from you. No matter where you might be, in every country, you are entitled to fair and reasonable treatment. And of course, the basic protection under human rights conventions. The National Human Rights Commission's logo resembles Taiwan's geographic outline and represents the Taiwanese people's pursuit of equality, freedom, diversity, democracy, and justice. NHRC, established based on the Paris Principles passed by the Yuan in 1993, focuses on protecting and promoting human rights. Its fundamental principles are independence, responsibilities, and pluralism. After the passing of the Paris Principles between 1990 and 2009, more than 100 national human rights institutions were established during these 2 decades. The period coincided with Taiwan's transition from an authoritarian rule to a democratic system after 38 years of suppression. When martial law was lifted, Taiwan achieved democratic constitutional reform, including legislative and presidential elections, and the first transition of political power with global attention. In 1999, 22 NGOs initiated the Alliance to promote NHRC and called for the government to set up a dedicated national human rights institution. In 2013, experts reviewed Taiwan's initial state report on ICCPR and ICESCR and called for establishing NHRC. In 2019, the Organic Act of the NHRC was passed. On August 1, 2020, the NHRC was finally established after 20 years of advocacy. The NHRC consists of 10 commissioners, including a chairperson, a vice chairperson, and 8 other commissioners who come from diverse backgrounds. The NHRC collects opinions from human rights groups to promote communication on social issues and policies. The NHRC is positioned as the nation's conscience, protecting disadvantaged groups, investigates cases of human rights violations and all forms of discrimination, and handles related complaints. The NHRC also provides support services to the visually impaired, hearing impaired, foreigners in Taiwan, and violated children and juveniles. Anyone who has experienced discrimination or a violation of their human rights may file a complaint. To understand the underlying structural issues leading to human rights violations, the NHRC undertakes systemic nationwide inspections through information collection, stakeholder engagement, and human rights advocacy to spark conversations in society and prevent the recurrence harm. From 2021 to 2023, investigations were conducted on sexual abuse against children and juveniles in placement agencies and on campus, and migrant workers child rearing in a foreign country. A report on human rights of migrant fishers included on-site inspections at fishing harbors in Kaohsiung and Ilan. After conducting focus groups and meetings with government agencies, the book Road to Migrant Fishers' Rights was published. The NHRC launched the Institutional Treatment of Mentally Ill Offenders project in response to legal changes, including the removal of the 5-year custody limit and the introduction of temporary placement. The NHRC proposed progressive policy and legislative changes to align institutional procedures with international human rights conventions. The NHRC also took part in the Constitutional Court procedure, promoting government compliance with human rights and aligning domestic laws with international standards. Since 2020, the NHRC has provided professional opinions on constitutional review cases, such as Indigenous Peoples and Health Insurance Database. During the authoritarian rule, the government monitors society through the intelligence apparatus. People experience improper arrest, interrogation, imprisonment, and torture. Political prisoners face unfair trials and arbitrary death sentences. The NHRC analyzed illegal government actions during the authoritarian rule and visited historical sites where injustices were committed. State human rights violations in the past thus serve as teaching materials to prevent their recurrence. Taiwan is not a UN member state. Whether the instrument of ratification can be submitted to and deposited with the UN Secretary General remains a challenge. Therefore, Taiwan adopted a unique local review, inviting international human rights experts to review the national report in line with the UN model. The NHRC provided its independent opinions on the national report and proposed improvements to the government based on the summary of the implementation status. The NHRC collaborates with domestic government agencies, NGOs, and international human rights institutions to promote human rights protection in line with the Paris Principles, as well as social dialogue between different ethnic groups and invite NGOs to participate. Since its founding, the NHRC actively engages in dialogue with institutions from other countries in Taiwan and national human rights institutions to exchange views. Meanwhile, it collaborates with NGOs to advocate social issues in the hopes that human rights can transcend borders and become enduring universal values. The UN developed the World Program for Human Rights Education as a 4-stage plan for human rights education. NHRC collaborated with the National Academy for Education Research on standard modules and human rights education courses for educators, government officials, law enforcement officers, and military personnel. Collaborating with the National Academy of Civil Service, human rights education was promoted for public agencies, aiding civil servants' understanding of the UN human rights clauses. In the future, the NHRC will continue developing human rights teaching and research programs in line with the Paris Principles. We will include children and juveniles in our efforts to promote human rights education activities. The NHRC aims to implement human rights conventions, protect children's rights, and drive human rights reform. We value the rights of people with disabilities, envisioning and creating a society in which everyone may fully participate. We value women's rights, aiming to eliminate all gender and status-based discrimination. We safeguard the rights of migrant workers, adhering to international standards. We ensure the protection of indigenous people's rights. We aim to achieve social equality and eliminate discrimination.
国家人权委员会的成立，是台湾走向世界，去承担和落实国际人权公约的重大里程碑。在未来，我们会持续关注弱势族群的人权状况，来厘清重大人权议题背后的结构性问题，同时结合民间的力量，推广人权教育。 积极地来跟国际人权机构交流，深化台湾对民主和自由的重视。我们的使命是成为国家的良心、弱势人民的依靠，让人权成为温暖的力量。让我们一起来促进社会正义的实现。